Hey everybody, welcome to the Ignited Podcast, Striking Industrial Automation Conversations. We're your hosts. I'm Travis Cox.
And I'm Thomas Burke.
And this episode is called From Namespace to Intelligence. Alex Marcy on Ignition, UNS, and MCP in the real world. Today we sit down with Alex Marcy, CEO of Corso Systems, and one of the most prolific and respected voices in the Ignition community. We're going to discuss what it means to build a business around Ignition, discuss UNS, Unified Namespace, and AI and MCP in Ignition. So Alex, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
So Alex, let's start with you. Can you tell me about yourself, Corso Systems, and how you ended up becoming one of the most well-known voices in our Ignition community?
Sure. So in 2006, 20 years ago, now I feel old, I graduated from University of Nevada, Reno with a degree in chemical engineering. And most people went into like process design and like not necessarily automation classes, but I really enjoyed the process control theory class that we had. So my like goal at that point was to get into automation, and the way the Career Center was set up at that time, they didn't know what a systems integrator was or PLCs were or anything. And we had only like briefly touched on PLCs in the class. So I went and worked for the county of Sonoma for a year because their general manager was a chemical engineer, and I had the least experience of anybody who applied for the entry-level position. So I got it because I had a chemical engineering background, and he liked that. And then I came back to Reno, worked at a civil engineering firm for a little bit, and saw a job posting on the UNR job board from a local integrator. And I was out of town that week. I think I saw it on a Monday. So I put together my resume and cover letter and showed up at their office the following Monday with like my tie on and like ready to go for an interview. And they sat me down, ran through an interview, and at the end were like, how did you have this resume like so perfectly tailored for this position? Like, we just posted this job and like this morning, and I showed up at like 9:00. And they didn't even know that like the corporate office based in Concord had posted this thing a week prior, looking for like entry-level people. So they thought I saw a newspaper ad that morning, and they basically offered me the job on the spot, and started a couple weeks later, and got handed a control philosophy for a project out at Kennametal, where they make carbide tooling. And that was kind of my first foray into automation. It used like I think it was Maple Systems, like software-based PLC with a PCI card you plug into the computer for I/O, and started working with that and worked there for a bunch of years and kind of hit all the popular platforms. Allen Bradley PLCs, at the time Wonderware was pretty big. So that was kind of the go-to, and worked there for a couple years. And they were based in Concord, and we had like a satellite office in Reno. And as I was told, our sales guy played golf at the same golf course that one of your salespeople played golf at. And they struck up a relationship, and we started doing factory SQL projects out of the Concord office. And then we did a factory PMI project out in Fernley. This is like late 2008, early 2009. So I got like the DVD case with the license key printed on it.
That's a relic now.
Wow.
That was one that somebody else took to install, and I never got back. But I do have like a binder full of stuff, but I looked, I don't have any factory PMI discs anymore. So that was kind of my first foray into Ignition, and then worked there for a couple more years until 2011. And through various projects and internal things, they had gotten bought out by an Australian company, decided it was time to leave there. And I wasn't looking to leave Reno at the time. So felt like I worked for the best company in town at the time. If I want to go do something else, I'm going to start my own thing. So started out on my own in 2011, ended up subcontracting to them for a project to close out 2011, and then started fully on my own in 2012. And I remember I had a breakdown of like my salary and things, and it was like, I'll basically just print money at this point, which I didn't know anything about sales and all of that at that point. So I had to kind of go through the ringer and figure out how to get projects and whatnot. And part of my working with inductive automation was I knew that being just myself, I wouldn't get a seat at the table talking to any of the bigger companies out there because I'm not showing up with a bunch of PLC and hardware and software sales on day one. But at that point, inductive was still, pretty scrappy, and like, I don't know how far east you had expanded at that point, but even talking to people in Reno was like nobody had heard of Ignition really. So filled out my application for the integrator program, got hooked up with Shane Miller as our sales rep, my sales rep at the time, and started doing everything I could to push Ignition into my customer base, and ended up going to Vegas for a little bit to live there for a year, which is where my parents live. My wife had a break between, or a gap year before law school, so we lived there for a year, and then moved out to Chicago. And Ignition had not made its way out to Chicago at that point at all, at least anybody I was talking to. And I'll also, early on when we were in Vegas, I think that's when you released the gold and core certifications. So I signed up for those like the moment I knew they existed and got those as quickly as I could. And then Shane emailed me about an MES certification, and this is before you had split off Sepasoft into a separate thing. And I like hunkered down on that. And by the time I finished it, nobody had received one yet. So I was like, maybe I'll be the first to get my MES certification. And I submitted it. And then like the next day, I think 3 or 4 companies showed up on the list. But I was probably one of the first, 15 or 20 people to get certified for all the levels. And I was sitting in Chicago, hadn't really figured out drumming up new business there, and was sitting kind of looking at the financials of everything, and was like, I have like a couple months of expenses left. I'll probably have to like wrap this up and get a job. And like, it was a great run. And this is in 2016. And about 5 minutes later, I got an email from Blommer Chocolate, which was literally like a mile away from my house. And they're like, we have this giant MES Ignition integration upgrade. Can you come check it out? Like, signed up for the vendor walkthrough and the tour, and got an email from the plant manager. And he was like, oh yeah, and this is for our Quakertown, Pennsylvania location. I'm like, oh my God, I can't afford to buy a plane ticket, but I need this work. So flew out there, did the tour, put my proposal together, put, like 80 hours of time into it. It was like super detailed and everything. And their entire team had flown out for Ignition training at whatever week they were going to award the project. So they're like, well, come on out to Folsom and we'll meet up and talk about it. And it was like, oh my God, I got to buy another plane ticket. Okay. So I go out there, stop by the office. I had never been to your offices at that point. That was when you were like in a shopping mall up at the top suite of one of the buildings. So met Shane in person for the first time. And I think this was even like pre-ICC. I don't think that had even happened at that point for the first time. So met them, went to the Blommer Chocolate guys' hotel room. They all walked in and sat down on the bed and gave me a PO for the project. And then probably the statute of limitations has worn off at this point. They required like resumes and things like most proposals do. So I put like 20 people that I knew in the industry that could probably work for me, since it was still just me at that point. Put all those in there. I'll figure it out if I get the job. So then ended up, nobody wanted to subcontract to me for that. So ended up going on Reddit, and there's a PLC subreddit, and somebody posted on there that they were in Indiana looking to like get their foot in the door. They had just taken a like vocational training boot camp type thing in automation. And I was like, well, I'm in Chicago. If you want to come in, we'll chat. I don't think I said it was an interview, but it definitely was. And met Bill Bond, who we'll talk about later in the episode with the Ignition Exchange. But he was my first employee. And then I found somebody to subcontract a little bit on some Siemens programming. And we basically did that job. And then that rolled into a couple of recommendations, one of which was Johnsonville Sausage, which was one of the companies I wanted to work for when I got into automation. And then I think everybody's still under NDA with a really big building in Reno, Nevada. I've gotten my hand slapped a couple times from your team about that. They were also on my list, so I ended up, through my Ignition experience, getting a job out there, and then it's just kind of rolled into additional work, and that rolled into an electric adventure vehicle manufacturer in Illinois. That was a pretty big job just after the pandemic, and we managed to make it through the pandemic without having to lose anybody, and then kind of grew a little bit after that, and then have just kind of been running since then. And I think that's kind of my story in a nutshell. And then here I am now talking about Unified Namespace quite a bit, getting into some AI integrations and things that we'll talk about. But it's been a wild ride. And, like I said on the Inductive Conversations podcast a few years ago, like Ignition has completely changed my life in ways I never could have foreseen sitting in Las Vegas doing my certification test, 15 or 16 years ago.
I know. I certainly remember. Going back when we had the certification tests when we first put them out there, and I was the one to grade your tests, Alex. And you were one of the early engineers. With every part of our evolution, and we'll talk more about this through the episode. You've been there at the forefront of doing these different efforts, and really are an expert on Ignition and how and deployments and now a premier integrator with Ignition. In that journey, it's been an incredible journey for sure.
Alex, you definitely have an amazing story that you got to write a book about,
Thank you.
of everything that you've been through and where you are today. So we got a couple things we're going to do, and we want to talk more through this and ask you questions. So we got a little thing we're going to do now.
At the beginning, though, we're going to talk about a lot of, you've already kind of thrown out a couple of acronyms and terms and industry jargon, right? There's a lot in this industry, right? And we thought it'd be fun at the beginning to throw out 4 terms for you. And you get to identify which of the 4 is fake or is fabricated, right? Okay. So we call it real or fabricated. And I think I think this you won't be stumped, but we try our hardest here. So
I can pull up the Corso Systems glossary to double check.
That's exactly. All right. So the first one is FEMSA 2210. The second is UNS. The third is node set, and the last is RAG. Which of those 4 is the fabricated one?
UNS is not, and RAG is not. That's an AI term. FEMSA, and what was the third one? FEMSA
2210 and node set.
I would say FEMSA 2210.
And you would be right.
You'd be right.
That is, it kind of sounds real, doesn't it? It sounds like maybe
like
Tom, you may have created that standard.
But
but UNS, we're going to talk a lot about UNS, Unified Namespace. That is a big area of conversation these days, and you're really leading the charge on that. RAG, definitely a term for AI. And then node set. Actually, node set is the OPC UA Part 5 companion spec that is defining data models, and it serializes to a node set, which is an XML document that we've written converters for to get into UDTs and Ignition. So anyways, it's kind of fun. Like there's so many industry terms and things that are out there, and it's for new people, it's a lot to take in.
And we're trying to explain all this different jargon that's out there. So, Alex, you've got an interesting history. What was the industry like when you first, started using Ignition and things like that? And, what did you see in it that others may have missed at the time?
I think the industry had been very, I guess for lack of a better comparison, like very Windows 3.1 driven. All of the software felt very like archaic and outdated, like it had been developed in the early 90s, like before Windows 95 even existed. And I think Windows XP had like just come out or was still to come out when I first got into the industry. So going through like pretty much all of your competition software, it all felt pretty much the same. And I think a lot of it probably was developed by the same people who moved jobs and things, but it felt like going back into the early 90s, like with Windows 3.1 in terms of the design and how things worked. And there was no interoperability between anything. I think the best case for that at that point was OPC based on DCOM. But even that was like, I don't know how, speaking to the person who made it, but I don't know how new that was to the industry, but certainly in the industries we were in, like that was a new topic and kind of new technology to get people invested in. And I had done a lot of web development, like learning different frameworks and things just as something that interested me, and like database integrations and all of that. And working with Ignition the first time was like, no offense, this was still a little clunky way back in the day, but it was better than everything else that was out there. And it really clicked from my brain, like how it was built. And it just like, it spoke to my engineer side of things in a way that made a lot more sense than dealing with things in other platforms. And even like setting up UDTs and parameters and all of that, doing that in any other platform was a nightmare. And to just like basically click and add a couple tags and a parameter and you're done. And then you can instantiate all your instances of all your equipment and everything. Like that was like the light bulb went off. And I think the graphics going back now, like the graphics are kind of laughable in terms of modern design aesthetics, like the tanks and
For
things.
sure.
But back then it was either like import a clip art image of a tank, or you could use the simple factory graphics. And then you guys came along with like a kind of like design for Windows XP type look and feel of different process graphics and things directly in the platform. And like you could make stuff that didn't embarrass you when you showed it to customers pretty easily. So that was, it was like a major leap forward from what everybody else in the industry was doing at that point. And I think it scared everybody quite a bit. And I think the one knock that everybody had was like, well, it's built on Java and like Java's not secure and like blah, blah, blah. But everybody else also used Java in some component of their thing. So, but it was just like a breath of fresh air and felt coming from the web development world with like ASP.NET and Ruby on Rails, Ignition really was not just a product like the other platforms were. It was like truly a software development platform, which like immediately I could tell, maybe there's some feature that needs to be added down the road, but you can import Java libraries and things and build modules. So you could basically build anything you need in Ignition, and you don't have to worry about ever telling a customer, no, that's not possible. Which the other platforms, like you constantly ran into things that are like, yeah, it could be maybe possible to do that if I like write a custom DLL file and import it in, but like it's probably going to take 6 weeks of effort and it may not work at the end of the day. So, but Ignition like blew all that out of the water. So
yeah, for you've been there from the very beginning. I mean, you talk about Factor SQL and Factor PMI, right? And a lot of the audience probably doesn't even know what those two things were. This was the predecessor to Ignition. So we had two products. Factor SQL was a bidirectional bridge between OPC and SQL databases, is where we really introduced bringing data from PLCs into IT software. And Factor PMI was the plant manager interface that was Java. That was really what became Vision inside of Ignition. Mm-hmm. And database was center of the model. And it was this new technology, databases that were bringing in, right? That was quite different from what was in the market, of course, at the time. Then that transition to Ignition, right? Back in 2010, when we released Ignition, you've been through all the different evolutions of the platform, and you've also had quite a few firsts. When Vision was a visualization platform for a long time, as you said, like we try to make it more forward thinking, but really in 2018 we came out with Perspective. That's where things started to really take off from a visualization standpoint, and you were the first to put a production system in place with Perspective, with a new HTML5 visualization for Ignition. Then in 2019, we introduced the Ignition Exchange, And it was great working with you there because you were like, hey, I want to help. I want to contribute to the community. I want to give back and take the knowledge we have and some of the things we have and build something for the exchange. And so you built one of the first non-inductive automation, or the first non-inductive automation resource that went on the exchange. I remember when we did the announcement where we did that in the Billathon, your stuff was there where people could start downloading. So walk us through those moments, the first, and sort of, you've been on that cusp the whole time. Why was that important to you? What did you do in those moments?
Yeah, so I think we'll tackle perspective first. I think with all my various web development experience, part of Ignition that always, I won't say frustrated me, it wasn't that intense, but like a possibility I saw in the horizon that like would be really cool if it was here now was what became Perspective. And I think it was ICC 2018 was the beta release for that, or maybe it came later that year. But like the moment I got the email that was released, I downloaded it and like immediately replicated a web development system I had built for like inventory management for a customer that needed to pull stuff up on their phone, and was like, this is basically what I've always wanted Ignition to do, because now I can pull it up in a web browser just like an ASP.NET application. And I still have all the power and experience of my Ignition training and projects and all of that behind me. And in a lot of ways, it kind of simplified things, especially talking to plant floor equipment over the OPC server. Like now you can, because I have built tools back in like the early 2010s to basically pull data out of like a historian and build a trend screen on a chart using ASP.NET, and I don't even remember the name, probably the high chart components or something, that I think there's some module examples for. And it was always like, if there was just a bridge to do this in Ignition, that would be incredible. But like, I can pull it out of the database, writing the queries and all of that, but it's like, oh, someday. And when that came out and I sat down and played with it, and we certainly ran into some bugs, as you always do with beta software. And it was probably one or two releases later, we had built some like proof of concept stuff to start marketing it. And through the grapevine, teamed up with SCS engineers who did like natural gas recovery at landfills. And they wanted a Perspective application built. And I think we started talking to them in like November or maybe October 2018. And I think we deployed the initial proof of concept by the end of the year, which, as far as I'm aware, nobody has ever claimed otherwise. That was the first like actual in production Perspective project that maybe Inductive did something for a customer here or there, but that was the first one I was ever aware of. And then we submitted that for a Firebrand at ICC 2019 and won the Firebrand award for that. So check out the ICC website for the video walkthrough of that. And SES did some cool, like, I think it was like drone imagery for like 3D visualization of the tanks and the equipment and things they were using. So it was a pretty cool project. From an Ignition perspective, it was basically a standard Ignition project, but built in Perspective. But it was the fact we could do that pretty seamlessly, even on a beta release, was pretty incredible. And then I think even back to Thomas's question of like, how did I become one of the most prolific and, as some would say, respected voices in the Ignition community? It's always been, you have the top 100 integrator list that's based on license sales and renewals. But a lot of our projects are very long-term. Most of our customers, I've been working with for over a decade at this point. So I'm not necessarily bringing to the table huge new license sales every week. So I've always kind of felt like one way I can contribute is talking about the platform and marketing and sharing things like the 12 days of Ignition Tipsmas at Christmas time.
Which, by the way, they're incredible. Everybody loves those. And I think you do that every year, right? You're going to do it again this year.
Incredible
LinkedIn,
stories.
They're awesome. They're great tips.
Yeah, so it's always been, what can I provide back to the community? And even going back to when I was kind of first getting started with Ignition, seeing like Kyle Chase, who now works at Inductive at Chimera Systems back then, was kind of at least from my side of the table, like the first ignition celebrity. Like his face was everywhere, and he was pretty big at ICC when those first started, and did a lot on the forums and did blog posts. And I kind of followed that model of, share all the value that I can and hope that brings eyeballs and leads. And like, luckily that has come to pass, as our website and LinkedIn and things is primarily our lead generation funnel, which is really good, and brings a lot of people who are very interested in the power of ignition and what you can do and what's possible. And I give them, some would say, to my sales guys, like, he gives away too much information.
Well,
but
Alex, we really appreciate your, from my perspective, you're very unique. Your company is very unique, right? And just talking about some of the what I consider unorthodox applications that you guys have built on the Ignition platform. You've shared some of those stories. And what did you think about, is the platform? Is there anything that the platform can't do, or did you just continue to try and explore opportunities?
I haven't run into what it can't do yet.
I like that.
I don't have an example off the top of my head. There have been things that took more effort than I would have anticipated, and like digging into some of the vision stuff and doing the the Java Swing components. That wasn't something I had any experience with prior to Ignition. So I think the things that have been hard per se have been a lack of prior experience, where Travis could probably look at it and do it in 5 minutes, but I got to take like a couple days to dig into Google and all of that. But it's been, my philosophy has always been say yes and figure it out, or I don't know and I'll figure out and get that done for you. And short of having to put more work into things than I thought, I've never had to tell a customer no with Ignition, and I have with other platforms before, just because it was not possible to do that.
Well, we
think,
appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. In interesting projects, when my first son was born, my wife was using a breast pump, and those were not as technologically advanced as you would assume compared to all consumer electronics out there. And she was frustrated, having to push the buttons constantly to do the different cycles and things. So during nap time for the first couple of weeks, I took a Raspberry Pi Pico microcontroller and interfaced that, I think, with a serial connection to Ignition, and wrote a perspective app she could run on her phone, and got my oscilloscope out to do the pulse width modulation on the pump to run it. So I had a perspective app for doing that, which was it got me some flack, because I was like, well, I'm working on this project for you, but got that working. And then we also, a couple years back, I have my Opto 22 Groove Epic here behind me. Through our connections there, they're one of the Ignition technology partners, and they've been great to work with as well over the years. We have a company called Tended Bar that builds, if you think of a Coke freestyle machine where you go up and you tap, I want, raspberry ginger ale, and you can do your own drink mixes on there. They built that except for cocktails and beer and wine. So it's running Opto 22 Groove hardware in the background with various valves. I mean, it looks kind of like a soda machine in terms of the pumping and wiring and valves and all that. But you select, okay, I want to get a rum and Coke or a Jack and Coke or whatever on the screen, and type it in. And then we also did a credit card integration with Ignition. So you can use their, I don't know what brand they're using, but your little square interface to swipe your credit card and buy your drink through Ignition. And it, on the back end, it does all the API calls for that. And it's deployed at various concert venues and stadiums and things. That's been a pretty interesting and cool project. I know a lot of companies have done automated bars in their offices and things, but this was a cool one to see out in the wild. So
it's definitely very unique, everything you've done. I mean, they are not typical applications that I would envision in our, in the manufacturing space, but they're perfect. It's yet another opportunity for us to take something, and explore that.
Well, it just shows with Alex's expertise and his knowledge of ignition, it really is. You could say yes to everything, right? Because there's a will, there's a way, and you're going to figure that out, right?
Yep.
And I really appreciate all of the education you do out there. I know sometimes you look from a sales side, well, we're giving things away, but really we're trying to make the whole industry better, right? Mm-hmm. And that is the goal of yours, is make the industry better. And one of the areas you're doing that really well is around UNS. You have a big voice on what that is. So for the audience here, can you explain a little bit about UNS, what it is, what you've done around that, resource you provide, and sort of why it really matters at this point in time?
Yeah, so I think, when I got started in the industry, a big project had like 5,000 tags, which, looking at projects across the industry since then, is like laughable. But even getting into like 20,000 tag systems back then was pretty big. And a lot of that was, even in the older platforms where UDTs are really difficult to deal with, you really just have a list of 20,000 tags you have to scroll through or search through every time you need something. So kind of leveraging the power of Ignition with UDTs and folder structures and organization can lend itself really well to making it easy for people to find data based on how they think about the data. So an electrician may be looking at, I want to look at slot 15, channel 1 for this like pump output or something. And they're going to look at the drawings and like go to that and figure out where it is. Somebody on the Ignition side might be thinking, okay, this is pump 101 run command or something. So they're looking in the structure. Maybe you've structured it as, pumps and valves and motors and various types of equipment in Ignition. But then you go to a plant manager and they're thinking more about the process. So they're going to be thinking, okay, I want to look at like the membrane system feed pump. And all of these ways to describe that pump they're talking about the exact same thing, but different people are talking about it in different ways. So early on, it was kind of thinking about things in terms of how people are communicating about things at their level. Made sense in terms of how you would structure things. And then you may need to create a separate folder for like the plant manager to look at data, how he wants to do. And you can get into like reference and derived tags to do that type of stuff. But then getting kind of deeper into the technology and what's available, and especially working with like MQTT, because that was pretty big back in, I think it was like 2017, 2018, when that first kind of hit the Ignition platform with our Nippers and Cirrus Links modules. Then there was a way to kind of structure your data and send it off to your MQTT broker. And it kind of clicked for me at that point. And to be quite honest, and I've told Arlen this, I didn't think MQTT was like anything of note the first year I heard about it, because it was like, here's MQTT, here's a protocol, Phillips 66, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, we have OPC UA, who cares? And then I think I talked to him or sent him an email or something and was like, dude, I don't get it. Like, what's the deal? And he pulled up his demo where he has the MQTT engine module disabled, and then he enables it and it generates like 20,000 tags and all the structure and everything in like 5 seconds. And I don't exactly know how he built it out in Vision, but it like builds out your screen and like, here's the network diagram of all of this stuff. And then it was like, oh, this makes sense. So kind of leveraging that, and then, going back to, I think a big voice and a divisive voice in the industry being Walker Reynolds. Talked a lot about UNS in the, like, I don't know when he started that, but like the late 2010s. So started following a lot of his stuff and seeing how he structures it and things, and tying that back to even like the Sepasoft production model of, enterprise site area line is like just another way to describe the same data that everybody's talking about. So at least the way it works for my brain is the UNS is a way to structure all of that data in a way that makes sense for whoever's using it, whether that's the electricians or the operators or the plant managers or the business folks who don't know what the pump is on the floor. They're just looking at like utility utilization or something. And it becomes a way to structure all of that data, both globally in terms of enterprise site area line equipment, so people can find what they're looking for there, but also, and as I talk about, I put out the Unified Namespace, the Ultimate Guide book a few years ago, which is available for free on our website, and we'll probably link it down below as well. Put that together as like, here's kind of my understanding of all of this, and did a bunch of blog posts as well. The book's kind of a conglomeration of a bunch of blog posts plus a few extra chapters just for the book. I mean, it's all free if you want to download it. But it explains how to do all of this in Ignition, some of the pitfalls of utilizing Sparkplug-B and that type of architecture with their topic structure, which I think is potentially being worked on at the moment. Shout out to Matthew Paris and David Schultz for both of their methods of how to handle that. I've chatted with both of them at length over it, and they're like, we would love to not have to do this, but like, this is how we've solved this problem.
Well, it's been
UNS
great.
really,
Like it's with a lot of your involvement in the education, like, and more of the voices coming together to understand just where these standards and where these things need to go, right? The advancement of these things so that we can have the best of what we need, right? And it's been great to see that.
Yeah, it's been pretty powerful for the industry, and led to the Prove It conference and a bunch of things at ICC, even like the Sparkplug data dash that should have gotten more adoption. But
I really tried. I really tried. This was a year where I'm like, all right, we got to show everybody, Tom. We got to show everybody how great MQTT is and Sparkplug. And so we're gonna get all the vendors and everybody kind of publish an asset in there and show it at the conference. And we did that one year, but we didn't get that many people to do it. But we could have had hundreds, if not thousands, just automatically discovered within that. And it really is that power of Ignition being the UNS and being able to deliver that data to whoever needs it, services, systems, people, whatever, wherever you're trying to get that information out there.
Yep. And I think like even to that point, that focuses kind of on the community aspect of Ignition. That's been, that was on my list of ideas to talk about earlier in the episode, but that's been a big piece of the puzzle for me too, is, I'm certainly on paper competition with the Vertex and the DMCs and the Barry Weidmuller Design Group folks. But we can also participate in things like the Build-a-thon together. And I just watched the Keith Gamble episode before we did this that you released this morning. So shout out to Keith. But it's been, a really big community that I haven't seen in the other ecosystems out there. Even like getting back to the really big building in Reno, I got brought into that by DMC because I was an Ignition expert, and they were like doing the Siemens PLC programming because they're like the world leader in that. And I have some friends that work there, and they're like, you're going to get a call in 10 minutes, pick up and just like say yes. We can't tell you who it is or anything about it. And I'm like, okay. So they called, and it was like, can you be an inductive automation expert to help with our Ignition deployment on this project? And like, it's going to be in Reno at a building that's being built, and it's really big. But like, I was like, yeah. So I kind of came in, and I think Elizabeth Hill talked on her Ignition Effect episode about how like her and I were sitting at a desk together, like side by side at a one-person desk, like training her how to do Ignition back in 2018, and then kind of trained everybody on their team how to get started with Ignition. And that would be something that just wouldn't happen, like in the Rockwell world or something, because that community aspect doesn't exist in the same way that it does here with Ignition. So it's been cool to be a part of that as well, with meeting tons of different people across tons of different industries and companies and integration firms and all that. So
we really do have an awesome community, and at ICC you could experience it. You could see the whole community come together, and the innovations and the ideas and the sharing and all of that, and that's another area, like with MCP, that's another area where we're starting to see more of this community come together.
So Alex, I want to explore that with you because you've been involved in MCP which is the Model Context Protocol. First off, can you tell us a little bit about MCP? And you're really the first in the industry to build real applications with it at Ignition, which is exciting, But can you start by explaining what is MCP and why does it matter in industrial automation?
Yeah, so I'll give you my layman understanding of it. People can correct me in the comments otherwise. But the way I think about MCP is it's a way to structure your tools so you'll have like your LLM is like if you're going into Claude or ChatGPT, you're chatting with the large language model, and that's going through all of its training data and coming up with its next character prediction and kind of responding with what it needs to do, whether that's doing research or writing code or whatnot. Then you also have what are known as AI agents. So those are basically tools, most popularly like OpenClaw is a recent one that kind of hit the world by storm. I've also used the Hermes agent quite a bit. Those are basically like system orchestrators that can call your LLM, and they can also call other tools and other systems and do web searches and things that your LLM can't do by itself. And MCP is a way to, this is what I get flamed on in the comments, but it's basically an AI-focused API. So typically if you have two software packages that are trying to talk to each other, each software package will expose data in a certain way, and you can even do like the Ignition Gateway API has a lot of documentations and calls and things like that. So you can hit it with a request and say, I want to get the status of this device, or before you could reset the trial in, I think it was 8.3.3 is what I was working on. I used the API to just reset the trial because there wasn't a button that showed up.
Oh, we shouldn't be saying that one, Alex. No.
Not yet.
No, it was. I think it was if it was activated, but you had some modules in trial mode, but then they fixed it. But there was a post on the forum about it that was like, we don't recommend this, but it is possible to do. But you can hit the Ignition API to get data about your gateway, and you don't. And the API will typically come with documentation that explains what it does, what data it needs to see for a request, and what data it will return. So MCP is basically that for AI agents and LLMs. So your agent will hit the LLM, and based on the tools that are available from an MCP server, the LLM can come up with, okay, we need to hit this tool to, say, get batch status from this piece of equipment or something, and it will return what you need from there. And I played with the Iggy demo from ICC last year that Reese Tyson had demoed on stage, and that was pretty cool. That allows you to like build trends and get alarm status tables and things directly in a chat client. And they used the web dev endpoint for that demo, for the web dev module, which we've also talked a lot about over the years, to effectively expose Ignition as an API that your agent can hit to like generate screens and get lists of tags and things. But then you also have the Ignition MPC server that's currently in like beta release on the forum.
It's an early preview right now.
Early preview, yeah.
If you go on the forum, you can go and look at it, download it, and there's some instructions on how to use it right now. Just sort of, we didn't know how people want to use it. Right? I wanted to get out there so you could see different kind of use cases, and but ultimately you have to build the tools, right, that you want to expose in there, and that's what you've done. Yeah.
So it basically, it kind of how you have the web dev endpoint you can set up down at the bottom of the project tree. It'll give you MCP tools you can set up in the middle, and under the hood, I'm sure it's different, but it's effectively a web dev endpoint that you can specify like your input and output parameters, and you can also give it a description. And the way I kind of think about the description is it's like additional prompting for the LLM, so you can kind of put some things in there so it better understands what that tool is going to be used for. And if you put no description in and you try and figure it out, and you're not using a powerful model, like if you're using a local LLM, it may come back with like gibberish. But if you put some descriptions in there, you can kind of like guide it a little bit better and use The way I think about it is you can use a less powerful large language model, like something you're running locally, compared to like Claude or ChatGPT, and you're also not paying for tokens and all of that. But you're kind of transferring some of the work on the agent side and on the MCP side to be better about your descriptions and what data you're passing back and forth. And overall, we've had a lot of companies that are using, these AI tools on the business side for like sales and accounting and like just business management. And we've started having some companies asking more on the process side, how can we utilize some of this? So I probably in the last couple of weeks threw together a quick proof of concept for a customer to do some batch tracking on some of their heat treating furnaces. And we can like generate batches and do recipe management and pull up status of batches and the status. So if they want to see, okay, how much longer is this furnace going to run before this load comes out, so they can kind of schedule their day. You can do all of that through a chat interface that you can like pull up on your phone. You can pull up in Perspective and really get access to any interesting information you need in your system. The one limitation to that is you still need to build out those tools. It's not, unless you're going to be doing like some vibe coding or something, it's not necessarily going to do that for you. But especially if you have web dev endpoints already set up, it's like almost copy paste. You have to tweak a few things here and there and change some of the variable names to get access to your parameters and things in the MCP server. But it kind of gives you all of that flexibility to directly integrate Ignition with all of your AI tooling as if it was any other piece of software, providing an MCP endpoint. And that seems to be the big marketing push, is like everybody has an MCP endpoint at this point. So,
well, it's keeping with the kind of theme of the first. I mean, you put it in production, it's early preview, you're building on it, you're showing the value of that. And to the education side, you're also, you have on your website, you have a blog or an article that talks about what you did in that heat treating case study, so that other people can learn about how to potentially use it as well. And I thank you for doing that, because it's a great way to kind of spark those ideas, right? And to help us also shape the product and where it needs to go here into the future.
Yep. And I think, I don't know what you have on your plans for the AI side, but I've kind of felt like getting Ignition integrated with something like OpenClaw or Hermes agent almost takes as much work as just building a module. So and by the time this is released, it should be available, working on an Ignition-based agent module so that we can basically just have an agent that runs an Ignition and has access to all that, kind of taking the next logical leap forward after the Yagi demo.
All right. Well, we've talked about a lot of things here, Alex, over the course of this, and I appreciate all the knowledge and all the contributions that you're really making, to the Ignition community. So, can you just, to end this, tell me, where is Corso Systems headed from here, and what are you most excited about building over the next few years?
I think in terms of where we're headed is kind of wrangling what the AI beast is doing and seeing, I think we're definitely in the middle of a big hype cycle, and it's been the earliest adoption of new technology in manufacturing that I've ever seen in my career. Usually it's like a 5 to 10 year gap between what's going on in the real world versus manufacturing. But we're starting to see a lot more adoption of that more quickly than anything else, more on like a 2 to 3 year time frame. So figuring that out and how we can kind of play in that and use that to increase our skills as a company and Ignition developers, and continuing to build with the platform, and even some of the tools in 8.3, like the form component and the drawing tools, are things everybody's been asking about for a long time that ultimately make our lives a lot easier. So really keeping up to date with what's in the platform. And I've also been working on a self-directed Ignition training course that's kind of geared to help people new to the industry that don't have any experience with manufacturing or anything to begin with, called SCADAForge, that's on our website. And that it's kind of a feeder. I think Inductive University is an amazing tool. I think the one gap that it has from training a lot of people in Ignition over the years is if you have no experience, there's still like a lot to learn about what we do in general. So I kind of take a step back from that and simplify things down to like, here's how to think about tags and UDTs and structures in Ignition from like looking at a car dashboard or a thermostat in your house, things that everybody has, daily experience with, that are kind of some of the gaps for getting people into automation to begin with. And then it also takes you as deep down the rabbit hole as anybody on my team has gone with getting into some AI stuff and like CSS integrations with Perspective and things that are maybe not commonplace in the automation world, but are like commonplace in the web development world. So working on that and, taking on ever more interesting and larger projects as those become available, and hopefully get our foot in some of this data center work, since that's going gangbusters right now.
That's a wild area for sure.
Yep.
Well, we really thank you, for coming on the show, and you have a lot of amazing resources. And so for the folks here, I mean, they can connect with you on LinkedIn. I would imagine visit your website, which is corsosystems.com. Is that right?
Yep.
And like I said, there's a lot of these the articles you've written in terms of UNS, the ultimate guide, the heat treat example, the MCP that's there, the whole SCADA Forge. I mean, I encourage everybody to go check all of that out, because it's really great material, and you're really helping the industry. And we really thank you for your thought leadership in this arena, especially around Ignition. I personally love seeing the stuff that you build. When we come out with new features, Alex, I know he's going to be the first one to go and build something cool with it. So it's always fun to see that. But again, thanks for coming on and sharing your expertise here with everybody, because again, you're helping to make this industry better.
And we really appreciate it. So with that,
thanks everybody for listening. And as always, subscribe to Ignited on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts so you never miss an episode. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.